Hello and welcome. Tonight we'll take a slow and gentle journey through the quiet corners of history. Places where time moved differently, where words were rare, and where wisdom was not taught with noise, but through silence, repetition, and stillness. You are about to drift through the world of ancient Buddhist monastic life, a world that promises peace but demands discipline. A world shaped not by ambition or noise, but by surrender and simplicity. This story isn't one of action or excitement. It's not about power or war. It's about stillness, endurance, and the quiet truths that only emerge when the noise fades. You'll experience what it might have felt like to live as a humble monk, to sit in silence before the rising sun, to sweep temple floors with mindful precision, to eat simply, speak rarely, and think deeply. Then we'll wander into the distant past, meeting a legendary figure who sat and kept sitting until the world noticed. We'll trace the quiet symbols of sacred trees and end with a visit to a more refined world, where monks became sages and stillness evolved into an art form. Let your body settle, let your breath slow, and let the rhythm of these old stories ease you into sleep. Imagine. It is still dark. The air is thin. You are lying on a simple woven mat, your only bedding a coarse cotton sheet. No pillow, no mattress, only the flat wooden floor beneath you. Firm, unmoving. There is no alarm clock, no bell beside you. But the rhythm of the monastery is as precise as any machine. And at 4 a.m., just before the first bird stirs, the temple bell tolls once. Low, heavy, resonant. You rise. There is no time for hesitation. You fold your mat neatly. You wash your face with cold water from a clay basin. Matter of fact, no hot taps, no soap, just water and the dim glow of an oil lamp. Outside, the floor is cold, stone or smoothed wood, depending on where your temple is built. Your feet feel the chill of the morning as you walk quietly, barefoot, to the meditation hall. No one speaks. No one looks around. You bow before entering, a full, respectful gesture, forehead to floor. Then you sit, cross-legged, still, facing the wall, or sometimes one another in rows, and then nothing. Not for 5 minutes, not for 10, but for hours. You breathe. You sit. You notice your knee hurts. You notice your thoughts drift. You try to return. To the breath. And again, and again, and again. Back to the breath. The hall is silent but alive. You hear someone swallow. Someone shift slightly. A muffled stomach growl. But no coughs, no sighs. These would break the sacred stillness. You are learning, through discomfort, what it means to observe rather than act. After meditation comes the alms round. In Theravada traditions, you walk barefoot through dusty village paths. Head slightly bowed, eyes lowered, holding a bowl. You don't ask for food. You receive what is given. Rice, maybe boiled vegetables. If the day is generous, perhaps a piece of fruit. There is no breakfast table, no utensils. You sit on the floor, once again, back at the monastery, and eat, in silence. The rules are clear. No eating after midday, no distractions, no craving. Your lunch is your last meal of the day. Not because of scarcity, but because that is the way. Your tasks follow, sweeping the grounds, cleaning the latrines, tending to the robes. Everything is done slowly, precisely, mindfully. Not because you're in a hurry, but because the act itself is the practice. If you are new here, your mind rebels. Why so early? Why so quiet? Why can't I sit more comfortably? But there are no answers. Only the sounds of brooms brushing stone. The smell of incense clinging to robes, and the wind moving through trees whose names you'll never learn. The rules shape every hour. You cannot own more than a few possessions. A robe, a bowl, a needle, a belt. You cannot lie, you cannot steal. You cannot sing or dance. You cannot eat after noon. You cannot sleep in soft beds. You cannot wear jewelry or perfume. These are not punishments. They are reminders that life is temporary, that comfort is illusion, that desire is endless unless you stop feeding it. As the sun sets, you gather again for chanting. Long, slow syllables in Pali or Sanskrit, echoing across the wooden beams. The words aren't meant to be understood, only absorbed. They are part of the rhythm now. There is one final meditation. Then sleep comes early. And again, the floor, the mat, the cold. And tomorrow, the bell will ring again. This is life in a monastery. A life designed not for comfort, but for clarity. A daily erasure of the self. A constant turning toward the breath, the body, the moment. You may have entered the monastery for peace, but peace here is earned. It is practiced, and it is never guaranteed. Now, as we step quietly out of this austere life, we will turn our attention to a man who once sat so still for so long that even the monks around him, he had become more stone than flesh. Let us begin his story. Now, imagine yourself in ancient China. The air is dense with the scent of pine and wet stone. A mist curls around the temple roofs, softening the lines between earth and sky. It is a time of shifting dynasties and foreign ideas, a time when silk and thought move slowly across borders. And in this drifting current of change, a solitary man arrives, uninvited, unadorned, unnoticed. His name is Bodhidharma. He says very little. He carries almost nothing. And yet, he brings with him something vast. No one knows exactly where he came from. Some say India. Others whisper of lands farther still. What is remembered, however, is not his origin, but his silence, and the way he sat. The story begins when he crossed into China during the 5th or 6th century, at a time when Buddhism was already spreading, but largely through scripture, ritual, and translation. Bodhidharma brought something else. He did not arrive with scrolls. He did not offer lengthy sermons. He did not curry favour with courts. Instead, he walked quietly to a remote cave near the Shaolin Temple. And he sat. For 9 years, according to legend, facing the wall, unmoving, unblinking, unconcerned with the passing world. This act, simple, repetitive and stark, would later become the cornerstone of Chan Buddhism in China and eventually Zen in Japan. But at the time, it was baffling. Why sit and stare at a wall for so long? Why shun disciples, debate, and even food? Some believed he was mad. Others thought he was performing a severe form of meditation known as wall-gazing or biguan. But Bodhidharma never explained. His teachings were sparse, elusive, and sometimes deliberately frustrating. He once told a disciple, "Outside of the scriptures, I transmit a special teaching, not founded on words or letters, a direct pointing to the mind. See your true nature and become Buddha." There is a legend quietly told that in those early years a monk named Huike approached Bodhidharma seeking wisdom. The elder monk refused to speak. Huike stood in the snow outside the cave, waiting through the wind, through the cold, until, in desperation, Huike cut off his own arm, holding it aloft as a symbol of his sincerity. Only then did Bodhidharma speak. Not with praise, not with excitement, but with calm instruction. This story, like many about Bodhidharma, is not meant to shock. It is meant to reveal the depth of commitment that the path of insight demands. Not physical endurance, but the inner endurance to let go of pride, identity, and even comfort. Bodhidharma was not impressed by recitation. He did not revere tradition blindly. When summoned by the Emperor Wu of Liang, a great patron of Buddhism, Bodhidharma remained unmoved. The emperor, expectant, proud of his temples and translations, asked, "What merit have I earned through these good deeds?" Bodhidharma replied, "None." It was not the answer the emperor expected, and so Bodhidharma was dismissed. He walked away without protest, without explanation, back to silence, explanatory. Over time, he accepted a few students, but even they struggled with his simplicity. There were no chants, no rituals, just sitting, watching the mind, and cutting through illusions. They say he wrote a brief text called The 2 Entrances and 4 Practices. But much of what he taught was passed without words, through presence, through example. He was not revered during his lifetime. He left no great institution behind. And yet, his influence spread like a slow-burning ember. Chan, Buddhism grew from his posture. Zen temples would echo his silence for centuries. And across Asia, the image of a quiet monk facing the wall became a symbol not of isolation, but of profound connection to the truth beyond thought. In paintings, he is often depicted with wild eyes, thick brows, and a fierce expression. Not because he was angry, but because awakening in its deepest form is not always gentle. It can be sharp, sudden, and disorienting, and yet reassuring. Bodhidharma taught that this awakening is already present in all of us. It simply must be seen. He did not bring new doctrine. He brought a mirror and asked that we stop moving and look. So we leave him now, still sitting, still watching, still facing the wall. But as we step away from the man who saw clearly in silence, we turn next toward the mystery that stood behind him and beneath him. Reverent, the sacred tree under which the first Buddha awakened. Awestruck, a tree that became more than bark and leaf. A tree that became legend. Inviting, let's explore its quiet power next. Now, let us step further back, far beyond caves and monastic rules, into the heart of the natural world, where wisdom was not written in books or scrolls, but in the movement of leaves, the quiet stretching of branches, and the stillness beneath a sacred tree. The Bodhi tree, a sprawling ficus religiosa, known also as the sacred fig, is not just a tree. It is a symbol, a living monument, and for many a quiet doorway between the ordinary and the eternal. The story begins with Siddhartha Gautama, a prince who left behind luxury, family, and security in search of an answer to a question that had no easy answer. Why do we suffer? For years he wandered, he tried extreme asceticism, denying the body, starving the senses, but this brought him no peace. And then he sat beneath a tree. He did not move, he did not speak. He simply watched the breath, watched the thoughts, watched the rising and falling of all things. And there, beneath the wide, heart-shaped leaves of the Bodhi tree, he awakened. What did he see? We don't know precisely. The texts say he saw the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, and the path to its end. But the experience itself was his alone. That one moment of insight, in the hush of morning beneath a fig tree, became the foundation of a world religion, and the tree itself became sacred. But fig trees had long held meaning even before the Buddha's enlightenment. In India, they were known for their longevity, their expansive shade, and their strange way of growing, dropping roots from their branches, turning air into roots and roots into trunks. They seemed to defy structure, neither one tree nor many, but something in between. To ancient eyes, they were both mysterious and enduring. They grew where temples were not, and often temples would grow near them. In time, branches of the original Bodhi tree were transplanted, guarded, enshrined. The most famous of these lives in Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, brought by the nun Sanghamita in the 3rd century BCE. It is said to be the oldest tree in the world planted by human hands and still tended by human hands. But sacred fig worship extended beyond Buddhism. In Hinduism, the tree is called the Ashvatha, associated with Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. Its roots are said to grow upward, symbolizing the inversion of worldly understanding, a reminder that true knowledge comes from a source we cannot always see. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the world itself as a sacred fig tree, with roots above and branches below, nourished by the eternal but entangled by desire. Elsewhere, in Jainism, the Bodhi tree becomes a place of meditation for their own awakened teachers, a tree of renunciation, of turning away from illusion. In all of these traditions, this one species of tree, not flamboyant, not towering like a cedar, not fragrant like a blossom, became a living symbol of inner truth. And what's most striking is that this tree does not speak. It teaches nothing in words. It has no creed, no commandments, only presence, only stillness. It simply is. And perhaps that is why it became sacred, not because it shouted truth, but because it allowed truth to arise in those who were ready to sit beneath it. To this day, if you visit Bodh Gaya in India, you'll find a descendant of that original tree. People still sit under it, still offer flowers, still close their eyes and breathe. The leaves, large and heart-shaped, flutter in the wind. They move like quiet hands, welcoming, patient. You do not need to believe in anything to sit beneath it. The tree makes no demands. But if you listen, not with ears but with awareness, you may hear something ancient, a silence that stretches across centuries. As we gently step away from the sacred fig and its silent teachings, we move now to a place where silence became refinement, where monks wrote poetry, painted scrolls, and found wisdom not just in nature, but in every gesture, every cup of tea, every word left unsaid. Let us now enter the quiet world of the Zen elite. Let us now drift to another place, another time. Imagine yourself in medieval Japan, in a walled compound tucked deep in the mountains. Its gates quiet, its stone paths swept, its lanterns unlit as daylight begins to fade. Here, in this still space, dwells a very different kind of monk. Not ascetic, not starving, but refined. He lives simply, but not without beauty. He wears a soft, carefully dyed robe, walks with slow, deliberate steps, and carries with him a quiet air of attention. This is the world of the Zen elite. It is not a world of wealth in the traditional sense, not gold, not jewels, not excess, but a world of intentional living, of sparse rooms with perfect balance, of gardens designed to look effortless, of cups chosen for their flaws. The day begins, as it always does, in silence, not imposed but chosen. There is a morning ritual, tea perhaps, but not tea as a beverage, tea as a practice. You sit before a low wooden table. The tools are laid out with care. A black ceramic bowl, a bamboo whisk, a small scoop of green powder. There is no rush, no idle chatter. The water boils slowly. The matcha is whisked to a gentle froth. You hold the bowl with 2 hands, sensory, feeling its weight, noticing its texture, deliberate. And then you drink, not for stimulation, not for thirst, but to become aware of drinking. This is the way of tea, Chado, a practice that began in temples and grew into an art form. In this quiet world, even calligraphy is meditation. The brush touches the rice paper with no room for revision. Every stroke must be intentional. There is no undo button, no erasing. The ink flows from silence through the hand into form. Profound, and each form becomes a mirror. Descriptive, scrolls hang from the walls. not adorned with grand scenes or colour, but with a single character or a brief phrase, a whisper of wisdom, something like contemplative, the moon reflected in still water. These monks, often former warriors, poets, or nobles, have turned their lives into a kind of sculpture, shaped not with stone, but with rhythm. Their meals are sparse, but beautifully presented. Their speech is rare, but deliberate. Even the gardens reflect this inner order. Rocks are arranged in patterns that evoke mountains or rivers. Sand is raked to suggest movement, though nothing moves. A single bonsai tree, crooked, old, stands alone. It has been trimmed with care, but not control. There are no statues of deities here, only space, only balance. Zen in this form is not a rejection of the world, but a transformation of it, a way to engage life without clinging. Some of these monks were advisors to emperors. Some wrote poetry that still lives. Some taught swordsmanship, not to win battles, but to master the self. And yet they all returned to the same practices: sitting, breathing, drinking tea, listening to the wind in the pine trees. In this space, time moves slowly, as if it too has learned the rhythm of the breath. There is no seeking of enlightenment, no hunger for visions, just a quiet trust that in simplicity, truth reveals itself. You might think this life easier than that of the barefoot monk or the cave-dwelling ascetic, but the discipline here is of a different kind. It is the discipline of constant awareness, of making every gesture, from opening a door to placing a brush, a reflection of inner stillness. And though the world outside this compound may rush and roar, within these walls there is only this moment. Now, and now, and now again. So, as we gently close the gate to this silent, scroll-lined world, we return to our own lives, where stillness may be rare, but not impossible. The journey ends, but the quiet we've touched tonight can stay with us. Let us gently return to the quiet courtyard of a Zen monastery. A place where stillness is not merely an absence of sound, but a living presence. The air here is cool and clean. A breeze moves through the bamboo stalks, and your sandals crunch softly on gravel paths raked with deliberate care. You are among the Zen elite, not wealthy in coin, but in attention. Here, even the simplest action becomes a path to insight. The folding of a robe, the boiling of water, the lifting of a tea bowl. We have already sat with them in the way of tea, felt the weight of the bowl, heard the quiet hiss of water in the kettle. But there is more to this world than tea alone. Imagine now a room bathed in natural light, its walls bare, except for a single scroll and a low wooden shelf. On this shelf sit the tools of the 4 arts, the traditional accomplishments of the cultivated Zen man. Not for display, not for ambition, but for quiet practice. First is the guqin, a 7-stringed zither with a soft, ancient voice. To play it is not to perform, it is to commune. The tones are subtle, so soft they might disappear into silence. The fingers press and slide, creating music that feels more like breath than melody. Monks would sit alone in the early morning or late at night, playing not to impress, but to listen to the mood of the moment. The guqin is not for the impatient. Its voice is quiet, its songs slow, its purpose reflection. Next, there is Chi, the game of Go, a square board. Black stones, white stones. The rules are simple, the possibilities endless. Zen monks loved this game, not for victory, but for what it revealed. The balance of aggression and patience, the shape of emptiness, the unfolding of strategy without attachment. Games could last hours, but no voices were raised, no pieces slammed, only the soft clack of stones as they marked the passage of time. You've already glimpsed the brush dancing across rice paper. But let us look closer now. The inkstone is prepared first, grinding stick against stone in a rhythm older than memory. Water is added drop by drop. Then comes the brush, one stroke, then another. A single character might take hours, not for its complexity, but because the mind must be completely still. The brush knows if your thoughts are scattered. The paper records every hesitation. There is no correcting, only accepting. And finally, hua, painting. A monk stands before a scroll, his mind clear. The brush tip is ready. He paints, not from life, but from stillness. Mountains emerge from a single sweep. A tree appears with 3 sparse lines. What he paints is not the world as it looks, but as it feels in silence. A single boat on a river, a lone pine on a cliff, an empty cottage with smoke rising faintly. There are no bright colors, no detail, just essence. Even the buildings in this world reflect the same values. The walls are thin, made of paper. Rooms are bare, yet never cold. The roofs extend far beyond the walls, casting soft shadows, as if the structure itself wants to protect you from too much light. Hallways are narrow, ceilings are low. Each step echoes gently against the wooden floor. Space is not filled, but held. Each empty corner is intentional, a place for the eye to rest, for the soul to breathe. There is a word, ma, that means both space and pause. And here space is as meaningful as substance. The Zen elite did not mark time by clocks. They marked it by seasons. In spring, they watched cherry blossoms fall, noting how beauty fades even as it arrives. In summer, they sat still in the heat, welcoming sweat as part of the moment. In autumn, they held quiet moon-viewing gatherings, sitting together beneath the night sky, speaking little, watching the moon drift through clouds. And in winter, they drank tea in silence, grateful for steam, for fire, for warmth. Their lives were not about wisdom. Their lives were wisdom. Everything in this world is a practice within a practice. The tea bowl is not just for drinking, it teaches balance. The ink stroke is not just for words, it teaches attention. Even sweeping the floor teaches patience. Zen monks lived in ways that modern life often forgets. They embraced stillness. They honored imperfection. They sought nothing but saw everything. And so, we leave them now, as the shadows lengthen and the pine trees sway in the fading light. They are not busy. They are not idle. They are simply present. Let us carry that presence now into the final quiet of the night. Let us prepare to let go, as they did, of striving, of noise, of thought. In stillness, we will close our eyes and drift. The stillness returns now, like a deep breath, held just beneath the surface of waking. We leave the brush strokes, the scrolls, and the polished tea bowls behind, but not the silence. In fact, we go deeper into it, into the space where words dissolve, and what remains is not understanding, but knowing without knowing. This is the realm of the Zen koan, not a puzzle, not a riddle, not something to be solved, but something to sit with, like an itch in the mind that cannot be scratched. or like a single bell ringing in the fog? A koan is a question that has no logical answer. It is given by a Zen master to a student, not to test intelligence, but to expose attachment to thinking itself. And through this gentle frustration, something shifts. The student may awaken, not with fireworks, but with a simple, quiet, "ah," as if remembering something ancient. Let us begin with one of the most famous koans. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Not two hands, just one. You may try to imagine it, maybe a faint whoosh or a slap against the wind. But the point is not the answer. The point is the space the question creates. A space where logic has no grip. You sit with it. You breathe it in. You feel the irritation of not knowing. And then you notice. You're no longer thinking about the question. You're just present. And that is the answer. Not in words, but in awareness. Thoughtful. Here is another. A monk asked the master Joshu, curious, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" The master answered, direct, mu, thoughtful, meaning nothing. Or more precisely, not yes, not no. Puzzled. But why? Explanatory. Because the student was asking the wrong question, clarifying, not wrong as in bad, but limiting. Trying to pin down the sacred with a net made of logic. Thoughtful. Joshu's answer, long pause, was not an answer. It was a mirror showing the student his own assumptions. Another student asked, "What is the true meaning of Zen?" The master replied, "The oak tree in the garden." Not a metaphor, not a code, just the tree, as it is, the rustling leaves, the rough bark, the dappled light. It's all right here. Zen does not decorate. You may be surprised to learn that sometimes Zen masters didn't answer in words at all. Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they struck the floor with a stick. Sometimes they said nothing. This may seem harsh or strange, but the goal was always the same: to jolt the student out of habit, to cut through the veil of concepts and drop them back into direct experience. No past, no future, no explanations. Just this. There are thousands of koans. Some are stories, some are questions, some are fragments. But the most important koan is not in any book. It is your own life. Your habits, your fears, your patterns. What happens when you observe them without trying to fix them? What happens when you listen to your own thoughts like distant bells in the fog? The koan reveals itself, not as a mystery to be solved, but as a mirror. And in that mirror you may find not answers, but peace with the lack of answers. So now, as you lie still, perhaps eyes closed, you may find your mind wandering again. You do not need to stop it. Let it drift. Let the questions float in, as soft as falling leaves. What is the sound of one hand? Where is the dog's Buddha nature? Why is the oak tree? The answer. Don't chase them. Don't trap them. Just listen and let them pass. Like clouds across a silent sky, somewhere, beyond the monastery gates, beyond the garden walls and mountain paths, there is a trail that grows fainter with each step, and if you follow it long enough, you will arrive at the edge of the known world. There, in a clearing half swallowed by forest, beside a stream no longer mapped, you might find the quiet dwelling of someone who once walked among others, but chose instead to live alone. They are a hermit, but not out of bitterness, not in rejection of life, not because they hated the world. They simply saw that by letting go, they might finally see it clearly. The hermit tradition is older than Buddhism, older than temples, older than books. In China, it was called yinshi, those who hide. In Japan, Yamabito, mountain people. In India, sadhus and forest renunciants. In the West, anchorites, desert fathers or recluses. And across all these cultures, the reason was similar. To step away from the noise, from the striving, from the pull of titles and roles, to vanish, not in sorrow, but in serenity, to become unseen and at peace. Imagine the day of a solitary monk living in a forested hollow. There is no alarm, no meetings, no audience. He wakes with the sun. He gathers wood for the fire. He drinks water drawn from a spring still cold from the night. His robe is patched, his hands are rough, but his breath is steady. There is no sermon to prepare, no book to finish, no reputation to defend. Instead, he sits, he listens, he watches the steam rise from his bowl of rice, and as he does, he disappears, not from the world, but from his self-image. He no longer clings to who he was, he no longer chases who he might become. He simply is. To live as a hermit is not to hate the world. It is to release one's grip on it. Letting go of ownership, ambition, argument, recognition, even certainty. And this letting go is not a giving up, it is a freeing up. The hermit becomes light, untethered, not separate from the world, but no longer entangled in it. He tends a small garden, watches insects, writes a line of poetry on a strip of bark and lets it drift downstream. Sometimes he is forgotten. Sometimes he writes nothing, says nothing, teaches no one. And yet his very being teaches something deep, that we do not need to possess something to know it, that we do not need to speak to say something true. History forgets most hermits. And yet, from time to time, their quiet lives ripple outward. Ryokan, the Japanese monk poet, who begged for rice by day and wrote gentle, childlike verses by moonlight. Zhuangzi, the Taoist sage, who dreamt he was a butterfly and woke unsure whether he was man or insect. The Tibetan saint, who spent decades in Himalayan caves, subsisting on nettles and singing of emptiness. These were not conquerors, not founders, not rulers. They disappeared, and by doing so, left behind a deeper kind of mark. So now, as you rest here, still and weightless in your own room, imagine yourself in that forest hut. The wind rustles the trees outside. A kettle simmers over a slow fire. The world has stopped looking for you. There is no one to impress, nothing to improve. You do not speak. You do not plan. You sit with the sound of rain on leaves and the warmth of your own breath. No questions, no answers, only this moment. And in this silence you disappear, not from existence, but from the burdens you never needed to carry. Imagine a world that has gone completely quiet, a white world, where everything is covered in snow. No footsteps, no voices. Only wind weaving gently through pine needles and the soft sound of falling flakes landing one by one on an untouched path. High in the mountains of northern Japan and China, Buddhist monks once chose to spend winters alone. Not in warm temples, but in small huts or caves buried in snow drifts, often miles from the nearest village. They did not see the winter as an obstacle, they saw it as a teacher. The cold offered clarity, the stillness insight. And in this frozen solitude, they practiced a way of life that was both deeply human and gently transcendent. The hut was simple, built of timber or clay, its roof heavy with snow. Inside there was a straw mat for sleeping, a clay stove for warmth, a pot for melting snow into water, and perhaps a single candle. The door might face east to catch the morning sun. A slit in the roof would let smoke rise, and around the hut, nothing but trees and snow. The monk would rise before dawn, shivering slightly, wrapped in a patched robe that barely held out the cold. He would light the fire slowly, mindfully. There was no rush. The breath steamed in the air. Hands were stiff but steady. Every movement became a form of meditation. In the morning, he might walk to a nearby stream, if it wasn't frozen over, to collect water. Sometimes he had to chop through thick ice with a wooden mallet, waiting patiently as the surface cracked and gave way. The rhythm of chopping was slow and deliberate, not angry, not hurried, each strike a form of presence. He carried the water back in a wooden pail, feeling the cold sting his fingers, his breath loud against the silence. Even pain became a teacher, even numbness a form of awareness. The hut was not always warm. Sometimes it never warmed up at all, and still the monk would sit, wrapped in layers, legs folded, hands resting gently in the lap. He did not chase warmth. He sat with the cold. He let it be part of the experience. He listened to the wind as it moved through the cracks in the door. He watched as frost formed on the edge of his water pot. He sat in silence, eyes half closed, back straight, breath slow. No mantra, no words, just breath and stillness and snow. In this world, there was no calendar, no errands, no expectations. Days passed like clouds. Sometimes he read a single line from a sacred text, then spent hours reflecting on it. Other times, he swept snow from his doorstep or repaired a hole in the wall with rice paste and bark. There was no goal except to be fully present, to experience the cold without resisting it, to observe the snow falling without needing it to stop, to become still as the mountains themselves. When he drank tea, it was not to feel comfort, but to feel the contrast, the heat of the cup against numb fingers, the steam rising against chilled cheeks, the warmth settling in the chest, like a small fire burning quietly in the center of the self. This, too, was practice, noticing, receiving, being. The tea was not sweet, it was not special, but in this moment it was enough. It was the whole world. Not all wisdom is spoken. Not all lessons are written. And not every truth is passed from mouth to ear. In the quiet halls of Zen monasteries, and in the winding forest paths of old China and Japan, there existed a form of teaching that had no syllables, no scrolls, no voice. Instead, a look, a breath, a movement of the hand. And within these gestures, centuries of meaning lived. Tonight, we will visit that silent world, where understanding passes not through language, but through presence itself. Imagine yourself again in the meditation hall. Candles flicker softly. The room smells of old wood and faint incense. Dozens of monks sit in stillness, eyes half closed, breathing in a slow rhythm. You sit among them. The teacher enters, robes brushing the floor. He does not speak. He walks to the front of the hall, kneels, and lifts a single stick of incense. He lights it, watches it burn. Then he sets it in the holder and bows. You expect words, but none come. And yet, somehow, you understand. The gesture is the teaching. There is a story of a Zen master and his student. For many months, the student asked questions, tried to prove his understanding, read texts, spoke eloquently. But the master said nothing. One day the student bowed to the master with no words, no expectation, and the master simply looked at him. Just looked. Not with judgment, not with approval, just with full attention. And in that moment, the student understood. He wept and bowed again. He had spent so long trying to become wise, he had forgotten how to be present. The gaze of the master reminded him. In another tale, a wandering monk asked a master, "What is the heart of the teaching?" The master lifted one hand and held up a single finger. That was all. No explanation, just one finger. To some it would mean nothing. But to the monk, in that still moment, the entire meaning of non-duality, of simplicity, of the one and the many became clear. That gesture echoed in his mind for the rest of his life, because it wasn't about the finger. It was about the silence in which the finger was raised. Sometimes a Zen master would sit in front of his students and say nothing for hours. He would simply breathe, and his breathing was the teaching. Slow, even, grounded in the belly. The students would begin to match his breath, then begin to hear the gaps between breaths, then begin to feel what silence feels like. Not emptiness, but awareness. And once you felt it, you don't need the words. They fall away like leaves in autumn, leaving only stillness. The way a monk bows, the angle of the arms during tea ceremony, the folding of robes, the sweeping of a floor. These were never just chores, they were part of the unspoken curriculum. To rush through them was to miss the point. To perform them with care was to understand the lesson. A bowed head taught humility, a quiet step taught gentleness, a precise fold taught patience. And through repetition, the body remembered what the mind had forgotten. That wisdom is not in the thinking, it's in the doing. Gently, attentively, again and again. Eventually, some of these silent teachings would give way to conversation. The master might speak again, the student might ask questions. But by then, the words were different. Not sharp, not grasping. Just soft ripples on the surface of a deep, quiet pond. And in this space, speech becomes more like poetry, not to inform, but to point gently to something that cannot be said. Now, as you lie still, perhaps with eyes closed, breathing slow and soft, you might begin to notice the wisdom around you that makes no sound, the stillness of the room, the weight of your body on the bed, the rise and fall of your own chest. You might imagine the hand raised in silence, the gaze that saw without judgment, the breath that passed from master to student without a single word. And you might feel that nothing more is needed. You are not missing anything. There is nothing to chase, nothing to understand. Only presence. Only now. Now we step outside, into a courtyard wrapped in stillness. The doors slide open with a soft wooden sound. You pass beneath the low eaves of the temple, your footsteps muffled by straw sandals. Ahead there is no grass, no flowers, no water, no statues, just sand, raked in careful lines. And stones, some large, some small, placed with intention in what appears to be empty space. This is a karasansui, a dry landscape garden, a place designed not to be beautiful, but to be contemplated. And tonight, we sit with it, not to explain it, but to let it explain us. At first glance, it seems so simple. A rectangular bed of white gravel, smoothed and combed into soft ripples. 5 or 10 stones of various sizes set into clusters, a few patches of moss, a wooden platform to sit and look. That's all. No vibrant colours, no fragrance, no sound of water. And yet, this garden is a conversation between space and stillness. Everything is intentional, and everything is meant to slow you down, to make you stop and see. Not with your eyes alone, but with your mind, uncluttered. Each morning a monk rakes the gravel, not to decorate it, but to refresh it. Precise, the lines are redrawn, carefully, one step at a time, never stepping where one has raked. Poetic, some lines are curved like waves, others straight like wind. Around the stones the rake hesitates, flowing like water around an island. The act of raking is itself a meditation. The sand does not resist, it simply receives. And when the pattern is complete, it disappears again with the next breeze, or the next day's footsteps. Like all things, in Zen, emptiness does not mean nothingness. It is not a void to fear. It is a space, thoughtful, ready to receive. The garden is mostly empty, thoughtful, but the space is not meaningless. It is open, inviting, silent, but not absent. The stones of the form, meditative, the gravel the formless, softly. Together they whisper something you can't quite explain, something about time, impermanence, slowly, non-attachment. You do not need to solve the message. Calmly, you simply sit. And let your breathing match the stillness. Thoughtful, some say the stones form a map, islands in the sea, mountains in the mist, even a mother tiger crossing a river with her cubs. Softly, others say the pattern means nothing at all. That meaning arises only, thoughtful, when your mind tries to grasp it, and that moment, slowly, the grasping, is the true lesson. Calmly, the garden isn't here to tell you what to think. It's here, thoughtful, to let you witness yourself thinking, and then, perhaps, to let that thinking slowly dissolve. As the sun arcs through the sky, the shadows shift, the rake lines cast tiny troughs, the stones shade their own contours. Softly, the light becomes part of the garden's story, and because there are no leaves to rustle, no water to ripple, thoughtful, you see the movement of stillness itself, a passing cloud, a shifting beam, a breeze that almost changes nothing. Firmly, this is not scenery. Calmly, this is invitation, an invitation to notice what you usually miss, thoughtful, to see what happens when nothing happens. Monks would sit for hours on wooden platforms or smooth stone benches, eyes open, hands resting lightly in their laps, no goal, no mantra, just the garden and the breath. Sometimes a thought would come, then pass, sometimes a memory, or a moment of emotion, but the garden would not react. It remained, still, unjudging. And in that, the monk could see himself more clearly, not as good or bad, just as passing, like a ripple in gravel. And eventually that thought too would settle. So now, as you lie still in the darkness, perhaps you imagine that gravel beneath you, cool, fine, raked in soft curving waves across your back. Perhaps you are the stone, or the shadow, or the hand that holds the rake. It doesn't matter. You are part of the pattern, and the pattern needs nothing. No fixing, no finishing. Just this. Just now. Just silence. The wind rustles through bamboo leaves. Somewhere, water drips from a stone basin into moss. And inside a quiet room, lit only by the soft grey light of early morning, a brush touches paper. One word, then another, then stillness. For the Zen poet, writing is not a task, but a form of listening. not to be published, not to be praised, but simply to witness the world as it is. And so tonight we step into that slow world, a world of short lines and deep stillness, a world where every syllable is deliberate, where the space between words says just as much as the words themselves. We enter the ancient craft of Zen poetry. Imagine a monk's study, a room no larger than a storage shed, tatami mats on the floor, a single window open to the garden, a kettle warms water for tea in the corner, and beside it, paper, inkstone, and brush. There is no desk, just a low table and a cushion. Before writing a single word, the monk sits quietly. He listens, not just to the wind and birds, but to his own breath, to the feeling of the moment. He is not waiting for inspiration, he is becoming receptive, like the blank page itself. Zen poetry is not long, sometimes only 5 syllables, then 7, then 5 again. But those few words contain a season, a moment, and a glimpse of the infinite. Here is one such poem, written by the monk Ryokan, who lived alone in the mountains. The thief left it behind. The moon at my window. No anger, no fear, just the moon still there. Or this one. Falling blossoms. The temple bell fades. Again the moment, a sound, a sight, then emptiness. But not a cold emptiness, gentle, a gentle one, a space in which beauty can be noticed, then let go. The brush moves slowly. Ink seeps into the paper like breath into lungs. The strokes are soft but intentional. Each character is shaped by the hand's stillness. If the mind is distracted, the ink will show it. If the writer is rushed, the letters will stumble. So writing becomes a reflection of the mind. If the mind is clear, the brush will follow. No need to press, no need to force, just black on white, like night on snow. Sometimes the monk does not write. He prepares tea instead. He sits with the warm bowl, feels its rough edges, lets the heat rise to his face, and in that moment, a poem begins to form. Not in the mouth, but in the body. He does not record it immediately. Instead, he lets it steep, like the tea. And when it is ready, when it has ripened silently, he writes it down. Not to remember it, but to let it go. Some Zen poets never kept their work. They wrote in the sand, on leaves, on the inside of temple doors. And when wind or rain took it away, they did not mind. The point was never permanence. The point was presence. Sometimes Ryokan would write poems with children in the snow, only to watch them melt by noon. What remained was the feeling, the play, the clarity. Now, as you lie still, perhaps you feel that something small and soft is forming at the edge of your thoughts. It is not a story, not a goal. Just a moment, a fragment, a leaf falling, a distant dog barking, the rhythm of your own breath. You do not need to capture it. You do not need to shape it. Let it be your poem. Let it float across your mind like ink across water. And when it fades, let that be the ending, the soft, unwritten line. Now, as you lie still, perhaps you feel that something small and soft is forming at the edge of your thoughts. It is not a story, not a goal, just a moment, a fragment. Consequently, a leaf falling, a distant dog barking, the rhythm of your own breath. You do not need to capture it. You do not need to shape it. Let it be your poem. Let it float across your mind like ink across water. And when it fades, let that be the ending, the soft, unwritten line. Imagine a bedroom lit only by the glow of an oil lamp. The walls are made of paper. Outside, the night hums with insects. A breeze stirs the curtain. And on a wooden tray by the bed, a brush, an inkstone, and a small notebook tucked beneath a soft headrest. This is a pillow book, reflective. Not a diary, not a record of grand events, but a place for gentle observations, whispers, thoughts that rise at dusk and drift away by dawn. Tonight, we lie beside one, attentive, and we listen. Over 1,000 years ago, in the imperial court of Heian-era Japan, a noble woman named Sei Shonagon kept such a book beside her pillow. Observational. She did not write great histories. She wrote about what she noticed. Illustrative, like how a screen door creaked in the wind, or how lovely it was to hear a friend's footsteps before seeing their face. Simply, she made lists, reciting things that quicken the heart, things that are distant though near, elegant things, poetic. Each list was a kind of poetry, each entry a moment captured, then let go, suggesting, let us make such a list now, calmly, not of tasks, but of still things, descriptive. A folded robe left in the moonlight, a single candle burning low, the sound of someone writing on paper in the next room, the shape of one cloud that looks like a crane, a kitten sleeping on its back. Thoughtful, each of these things, small, easy to miss, was worth noticing, contemplative, not to understand, but to admire, quietly, philosophical, to give a fleeting thing a little more time before it passes. The smell of rain after it stops, ink drying on paper, steam rising from a bath, a distant flute, the moment before you fall asleep, summarizing. Shonagon loved the in-between, the transitions, the impermanent, concluding. In her world, nothing stayed, and that was precisely what made it beautiful. At night, in the Heian court, the rooms were large and empty, lit by lamps, curtained with soft cloths. Court ladies like Shonagon wore many layers and walked slowly so their sleeves wouldn't drag through soot. They spoke in hushed tones and wrote letters on folded paper, scented with plum blossom or sandalwood. Nothing was rushed. Even conversations took place in poetry. To say, "I miss you," they might write. "The wind tonight, colder since you left my sleeve." Then fold the message in layers of silk and send it quietly down a corridor. As the night deepens, you too might make a list. Not to share, not to finish, just to notice. Things that are soft, your blanket against your skin, the hush between your thoughts, the way light from a phone screen fades when turned off. The outline of leaves moving against the curtain. You don't have to write them. You don't even have to remember. Just feel the comfort of noticing, like a quiet guest, arriving late and leaving early.
For those fought one stanyan night,
The Orlean chat perf experienced that the Shonagon's pillow book was never meant to be published. It was just for her, a private conversation with the night. And yet, 1,000 years later, we still read it, not because it's dramatic, but because it's calm, unhurried, real. It teaches us something rare, that wisdom doesn't always arrive with thunder. It steps in quietly, with socks on, carrying a candle, and it sits beside your bed until you're ready to fall asleep. There are no clocks here, no alarms, no calendar reminders blinking across a screen. In the monastery, time flows differently. It's not measured by minutes, but by movement, by light, and by the sound of a single bell, a low, resonant tone carried by the wind. That is how the day begins and how it ends. Tonight, we live one such day, not to rush through it, but to listen, to walk slowly through its hours as monks once did and as some still do. Let the rhythm of their day gently guide you into rest. In the still dark before sunrise, the air is cold and full of breath. A monk walks the temple grounds with a wooden mallet in hand. He reaches the bell tower, pauses, bows, then with one smooth motion, he strikes the bronze bell. A deep tone rolls across the valley, and that is the signal. The others rise in silence. There is no chatter, no grumbling, only the soft rustle of robes, bare feet on floorboards, and the occasional creak of a door being opened to morning air. Before anything else, they sit. No food, no conversation, just rows of monks still in the dark, facing the wall, breathing. The room is unheated, the windows fog with condensation. Outside, crows begin to stir. Inside, the breath moves. In, out. In, out. This is how the day begins. Not with planning, but with presence. After meditation, the bell sounds again. A different tone this time. Brighter, more alert. It is time for food. Rice, soup, and pickles. Eaten in silence. Each movement choreographed. Each bite taken with attention. Then, the bowl is cleaned with warm tea, dried with a cloth, put away, and the morning turns to work. Some sweep, some rake, some tend the garden or chop wood. There is no rush, but there is rhythm, like the tide, like breath. As the sun climbs, the monks gather in the main hall. They chant sutras in slow unison. The words, ancient and soft, flow like water over smooth stones. Then come the scrolls, old texts unfurled on low tables, some copied by hand, some studied in silence. It is not about remembering, it is about returning, reading the same lines again and again, like walking a familiar path until your footsteps wear it smooth. In the afternoon there is tea. Not a ceremony, just a moment. A cup held with both hands, the bitter scent of roasted leaves, the warmth seeping into the palms. Then, perhaps, a walk through the grounds, watering the garden, wiping a window, repairing a sandal. There is always something to do. But never too much. Enough to keep the hands moving, not enough to trouble the mind. As light begins to fade, the shadows lengthen on the temple floor. Candles are lit, shoji doors are closed. Then, again, the bell. The same deep tone that greeted the dawn now lowers its head to the evening. The monks bow, sit, and return to stillness. The breath slows. The thoughts soften. Outside, the sky turns violet. A crane calls across the fields. A dog barks in the distance. Inside, only silence remains. There is no television, no glowing screens, just the moonlight across the floor and the sound of insects returning. Some monks sleep on the floor, some sit upright through the night, some read, some do nothing at all. There is no official end, just the slow quieting of breath and light and thought. The bell does not sound again until morning. Time in the monastery is not something to beat. It is something to be with. It is not a clock ticking. It is a bell ringing, a leaf falling, a bowl being placed gently on the table. And so the days pass, not counted but lived, not filled but unfolded. And now your day, too, has come to its close. No need to do anything more. Let the last bell ring softly somewhere far away. Let the day drift into stillness, and let your breath meet the night. The world, once so full of sound, has quieted. The bells have long since stopped ringing. The footsteps on temple floors have faded. The scrolls have been rolled, the brushes rinsed, the bowls washed and returned to their shelves. Somewhere in the distance, the last cicada hums, its voice drawn out into a thin thread of sound before it too disappears into silence. And here you are now, still, softened by the journey of the night, a quiet traveller at the edge of sleep. There is nothing left to chase, nothing to do, no more stories, no more scrolls, no more cups to be poured. All that remains is the rhythm of your breath, gentle, unhurried, like the tide brushing against a forgotten shore. You have visited many places in the past 1 hour without ever leaving your room. You've walked barefoot through frost-covered stone corridors, knelt in the chill before dawn, and watched moonlight filter through bamboo slats. You sat with the silence of monks and with the rustle of robes on worn wooden floors. You've heard the low call of evening bells and tasted the steam of humble tea held in 2 quiet hands. Every part of you has been here, not in body perhaps, but in stillness. There is a different kind of travel that happens when the body is quiet and the mind is loose, uncoiled, floating. And now you're in that space in between, that soft and weightless stretch of time just before sleep, when everything outside grows dim and everything inside slows. Let the images that linger drift gently across your mind, not as sharp memories, but as impressions, like footprints in sand, slowly filling with wind-blown dust. You do not need to hold on to them. Let the gravel of the Zen garden smooth itself again. Let the scroll curl inward. Let the brush rest in its tray. Let the candle flicker out. All these things are doing what they were always meant to do, fade softly into the next breath. Even the thoughts you have now can be treated this way. You do not need to stop them. You do not need to follow them. Just notice. And then let them pass. Like clouds over a wide and quiet sky, you have entered a slower world, one where time isn't marked by seconds or steps, but by the drift of incense smoke or the faint crackle of a tea kettle cooling. You are no longer asked to respond. You are no longer expected to think. Here, in this moment, you are simply allowed to be, as soft as a folded robe, as silent as a temple bell that has just been struck, as still as a stone in a moonlit garden. Let that stillness rise up in you now, not forced, not practiced, just remembered, because you were always made for rest. So breathe now. Slow and quiet, the way monks breathe at the end of the day, the way mountains breathe under snow, the way old trees breathe in the dark. There is nothing else you need to be, no one you must become, no wisdom you must reach for. You are already here, settled. Enough. Let the world settle with you. Let your body grow heavier against the bed, like a bell returning to silence after a single sacred chime. And when your thoughts return, as they sometimes do, welcome them like old friends passing by in the dusk. Let them speak, then let them walk on, softly. You are not following them, you are not resisting them, you are simply still. And now, the gravel in the garden has stilled, the ink on the page has dried. The night wraps itself around you like a robe of soft grey silence. You are no longer on the path, you are part of it. You are not listening to the story, you are inside it, dreaming it from within. The temple is asleep, the stars are steady. The bell, once struck, has completed its song. Now rest, let the world settle, let the body fall, let your mind drift beyond words. And when you wake, the silence will still be here, waiting, like a friend who never left.
Let us sit a little longer with the idea that wisdom is not a thing we find, but a mirror we polish. Bodhidharma once said that his teaching was a direct pointing to the mind. But what does that mean? It means that wisdom is not a scroll, not a word, not even a thought. It is the simple act of noticing without reacting, of seeing clearly without grasping, of watching the mind not to judge it, but to know it as it is. Imagine a polished mirror resting in the corner of a quiet room. It does not shine brightly, it does not flash or dazzle. It simply reflects whatever stands before it without distortion or pride. The mind, when clear, is like that. Not clever, not eloquent, just calm, still, present. But most of us do not live in that room. We live in the hallway, busy, distracted, always glancing in the mirror, but never quite seeing it. We are tugged by memory, by desire, by fear, by image. And so, the wisdom of Zen is not to run towards some distant idea of enlightenment. It is not to chant louder, sit harder, or try more furiously. It is to pause, breathe, see. The mirror is already here. We do not polish it with effort. We polish it by letting the dust settle. And this is why silence is the heart of Zen. Not as an escape from the world, but as a return to it. Because when we stop speaking, the world speaks back in subtler ways. The crunch of sandals on gravel, the wind in a bamboo grove, the sound of tea being poured, each one an echo of now. There are no teachers in Zen who give you answers, only those who help you ask better questions. What am I clinging to? What story am I telling myself? What would remain if I stopped seeking anything at all? These are not questions for the intellect. They are koans, puzzles with no solution. Their purpose is not to be solved, but to dissolve the self that demands a solution. In the presence of a true mirror, there is no need to move. So, we sit, not because we know the path, but because we trust that silence will show us what words never could. Let that stillness linger. Let us now move gently toward one final reflection on what remains when even the mirror disappears.
And so we come to the final segment of our journey tonight. Not a lesson, not an ending, but a path without footsteps. In Zen there is a phrase, the gateless gate. It refers to the idea that enlightenment is not behind a locked door, but before you, always without barrier. You walk it by not walking, you seek it by not seeking, you reach it by realizing there was nowhere else to go. Reverently, Bodhidharma didn't change the world with armies or inventions. He did not write volumes, he did not gather thousands. He sat in silence, and by doing so, changed the lineage of an entire tradition. His was a revolution not of fire, but of stillness, and that stillness, if you let it, continues now, through you. The room you lie in is no longer just a room, it is a temple, dimly lit by presence. The sounds outside the window, they are the chants of the wind, the mantras of the night. Every breath you take is a return to now. And if you were to rise tomorrow with no plan,
no script, no effort to perform, and simply walk, mindfully, softly, without demand, then you would be walking the ancient path, the path where nothing is gained and nothing is lost, the path that requires no approval, no reward, no result. It is the most gentle kind of freedom, one where you are not carried away by thoughts, nor burdened by the need to make sense of things. You simply are, and that, in the end, is the great wisdom of the Zen path. Not brilliance, not mastery, not even peace, but presence. It is quiet, it is ordinary, and it is enough. So rest here, in this stillness, this mirror, this breath. The path does not end, but it no longer needs to be walked. You are already home. Imagine for a moment a broom made of bundled twigs. It rests by a wooden step, its fibers splayed and worn smooth by time. Each morning a monk picks it up. He does not sweep because there is dirt, he sweeps because sweeping is the practice. In Zen, tasks are not performed for efficiency, they are performed for clarity. The robe is folded not because it must be neat, but because in the folding one's mind can become clear. The bowl is washed not because it is dirty, but because in washing it the bowl disappears, and only the washing remains. This is the discipline of empty tasks. To do something not to finish it, but to be fully in it. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes. What did you achieve? What have you earned? What will you gain from this? But in the monastery, the question is reversed. Can you sweep without hoping the floor will be clean? Can you sit without waiting to feel better? Can you listen without needing to respond? This is not about perfection. It is about repetition, about building a rhythm so slow, so subtle, that the ego begins to dissolve inside it. One sweep, one breath, one sip of tea. Done not for the result, but for the presence it cultivates. In this way, the monk's day becomes sacred, not because it is filled with miracles, but because it is filled with attention. To brush your robe as the sun rises, to refill an oil lamp with both hands, to stand still while rain softens the world outside, these are not interruptions to practice. They are the practice. So tonight, as you drift, ask yourself, what task tomorrow can you perform without rushing, without needing to finish, without expecting anything? That may be the moment your wisdom begins. It's a kind of wisdom in admitting, I don't know. In Zen, this is not a weakness. It is a gate that leads beyond the noise of opinions, into the open, cloudless sky of direct experience. The greatest teachers were not those with perfect answers. They were those who asked better questions and waited. Bodhidharma, when asked the meaning of life, replied only with a stare, a silence more meaningful than any words. In Zen stories, this is called cutting through, not with logic, but with presence. A monk might ask, "What is Buddha?" And the teacher answers, 3 pounds of flax. Go wash your bowl. The cypress tree in the courtyard. Not to confuse, but to point beyond explanation. These are not riddles to solve. They are reminders that reality does not live in words. The truth cannot be grasped. Imagine that you are standing before a stone gate, but there is no lock, no sign, no door, just space. You cannot push through it. You cannot figure it out. You must let go of knowing, and in doing so, you pass through. The mind quiets, the striving ends, and you realize you were never outside the gate to begin with. So tonight, rest not in what you know, but in the quiet hum of mystery. Let it hold you like wind holds a falling leaf, and trust that this too is wisdom. If all the chants were forgotten, if all the texts vanished, if every teacher were silent, there would still be this. The breath, soft, repetitive, unnoticed by the mind, but always present. In many traditions, the breath is sacred. It connects the seen and unseen. It is the first thing we are given, and the last thing we release. In Zen, you do not chase breath. You return to it, again and again. Each inhale a rising wave. Each exhale, a quiet falling away. It does not need to be controlled. It only needs to be noticed. This is the true temple, not built of wood or stone, but woven with the rhythm of lungs and sky. As you lie here now, your breath is still working, still carrying you gently through the night. You don't have to do anything. Just feel it. The way your chest rises, the way your ribs expand, the way the air cools your nose and leaves warm. Let this rhythm become your mantra. Let it carry you across dreams and back again. There is no need to go anywhere. The wisdom is here, in this moment, in this breath. So stay and listen to the sound of one breath and the silence that follows it.